which is wonderful. And I have these T-shirts printed. So whenever I go out drinking beer on Beer Day Britain, I always wear my Cheers to Beer T-shirt. Plus, you can spill anything down it, even kebabs, and it doesn't show. So.
That's so fun. Yeah, it's quite interesting. It's not the right word. Yeah, it's quite good fun to watch when it hits the time for saying cheers to beer. It's 7:30 or 7.
7 o'clock. 7. Yes.
So
that's
and then
the
everyone
national
just
cheers to beer at 7 o'clock.
Yeah, and then everyone starts posting their, with their friends or when they're holding a beer up and hashtagging, and just keep bang, 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 bang. It's quite good to actually see everybody rallying together over a drink.
It really is, and it'll be particularly that case this year, won't it? Back in the pub, hopefully. It takes me a couple of days after Beer Day Britain to go through all the social media and respond to it, or like things, or look at them and see what people have done. But it's fantastic. Quite often, the hashtag starts trending from early on in the day, so it's just people saying it anyway, or hashtag National Beer Day, or various hashtags. But it's fantastic to see the support, and it is our national drink and makes people very happy and brings people together like nothing else does.
So, I've started seeing things already in a lot of Insta posts.
Yes, you're really good on Insta, and I'm not so good on it. I'm really good on Twitter, but I'm not very good on Insta.
I've only just
got... I'm a writer, so my natural
more words.
Yeah. Not as
I've
big
only just got Insta at Rarakoala, by the way, and at Beer Day Britain and at School of Brew. I've only just started kind of getting into it.
For Rarakoala, it'd be brilliant because you're so visual. Your wonderful creations are just beautiful. Beautiful. I love looking at them. Love it.
Oh, thank you. That's really good to hear.
Is that backdrop where you do your pictures, by the way?
Do you know
backdrop that you've got there? Is that it? Is that
when
the famous
it's all like lockdown? I bought this is actually like the wallpaper. This blooming backdrop I bought. Watched this YouTube thing on how to take your photos and get the light. There's me with a selfie stick trying to look. I've got to look and see if the camera can see me. Oh no, why are you pulling that face for? No, that's not right. And then clicking loads, and then you've got to sort out exposure. Oh, nightmare.
Well, they work really well and they look great.
So. Thank you. But my sister-in-law's a professional photographer, so I can go there now. And
great.
And then my latest photos, I'm just waiting for. Her sisters are really beautiful, so I've used them as my models, so it's not just me all the time.
Oh, it's going to look as though Rarakoala is taking over the world, which I hope it does.
Absolute hat world domination.
Yeah. Forget the Kardashians. It's the koalas. Yeah.
Koalas, yeah. What are you wearing? Oh, it's a Rarakoala. Oh, I want those.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah. So beer.
Yes, beer. That's a plastic hop. I know that's like going, yes, I know. Because your Rarakoala acolytes and fans may not know that you are Queen of Hops, aren't you?
Yeah.
One of the ingredients for beer.
Hop merchant, yeah.
So I'm Jane Peyton, and as Charlie said, I've known Charlie for years from the beer industry. I've been a beer writer for years and a beer sommelier, and I run a business or founded a business called the School of Booze. So I teach people. I've got downloadable courses that are already recorded and written. So you just download either in beer, cider, or wine. So I educate in all alcoholic drinks. Beer is my favorite drink, and it's the drink that I'm probably best known for, actually. And I know a lot of people in the beer industry.
I would say the same, yeah.
Yes.
For you, yeah. I associate you with beer.
And I'm a writer as well. And this is my latest book, The Philosophy of Beer. Charlie, by the way, Charlie's my best customer. She bought my gin book, The Philosophy of Gin. She's got that book, and she bought The Philosophy of Beer as well. So she is actually a doctor of philosophy now. Because
I love facts. I just love it. I can't always remember them, but I know that at some point I've had a good fact about it.
Well, I love a fact as well. So I try and pack loads and loads of facts into my books, because I think that's what people want. They want to learn something, but they want those little nuggets of facts that they can then tell the friends at work or in the pub, remember them and relate them. So I always include loads of facts as well. Would you like to know some?
Yes, go for it.
Well, beer is one of the oldest alcoholic drinks, and it's been in the human condition or in the human diet for at least 13,000 years.
Never. I know this, but I'm just...
No, it's surprising. People often say, oh, well, I know that the ancient Egyptians drank beer because beer was very much part of the culture there. But the ancient Egyptians, 5,000 years old, their civilization. So beer is much older than the ancient Egyptians. Still in the similar area of the world, that area, the Middle East, was known as the Fertile Crescent, and it's where agriculture first developed. It's where humans stopped being nomadic people, hunter-gatherers, and they settled in one place. And the reason that historians or anthropologists believe humans settled in that area is because they wanted to grow cereal in this area where the soils were good, the climate was good, the Fertile Crescent. Nowadays we think, oh, the Middle East, it's really hot, it's deserty. It wasn't always like that. So this area, the Fertile Crescent, is where cereal started. Now, if you have cereal and you are a human 13,000 years ago or earlier, your body cannot digest cereal if you eat it. So all the goodness in the cereal is indigestible to a human because the human body hasn't adapted to be able to...
Why am I growing cereal then? Or is that what is there in that fertile land?
They're growing cereal because they've discovered that this grass, that wheat, that whatever, and by the way, grass, wheat, corn, any cereals are grasses, basically. So they realized that this plant somehow ferments and creates this drink thing that gives you a buzz. I'm talking in really crude language because very early, those humans 13,000 years or earlier, it would have been that, a bit of trial and error, like, oh, let's try that, oh, let's try that, oh, let's put that together, let's boil that. Now, you could digest the goodness if you drank it as beer. Right. So those bread cakes, they'd make little bread cakes, not to eat, to make beer out of.
To stick in some water and let it dissolve or something, right?
Exactly. So it would dissolve the water. They might heat it with hot stones. They probably wouldn't have boiled it, maybe just heated it. It might have even just got warm enough in the sunlight, hot sunlight, just to be warm enough for wild yeast in there to ferment the sugars that were in that.
I was just going to ask about the yeast thing because it gets quite complicated. Even though there's like 4 ingredients in beer, the actual science of it is quite a lot. So for someone 13,000 years ago to be scientific about it, so you're saying whatever was in the air, yeast-wise,
yes,
they haven't actually, cultured yeast.
They don't have any cultured yeast. They don't even know what yeast is. They can't see it. But when it starts fermenting, they can see it because it becomes this froth on the top of the water. And that's the magic of it. So that's, to them, supernatural. There was always a connection between the deities and this frothing, bubbling thing, this liquid that made them feel good and made them feel a bit buzzed. So drinking beer was a way of communing with your deity. And there are deities of beer. There are, several deities of beer. Probably the best known deity of beer was Ninkasi, a female goddess.
I've got a hat called Ninkasi, actually.
Do you?
Yeah, and it is a beer. It's got 3 pots on it, and it's like on a tray. It's hat fabric, but to resemble a tray. Oh, it's like a light beer, a dark beer, and an amber kind of beer.
Oh God, that has got to be the beer of Thursday at the Great British Beer Festival, which is Hat Day. That has got to be the beer, the hat of that festival.
Yeah, that's what I'm hoping for. Oh, and a percentage of that sale for that actually goes to the licensed trade charity that supports people that need picking up, putting back on their feet, from land, especially like at this time where the pubs have been shut. So basically the message is landlords and pubs have been there for you. We've cried, we've ranted, we've rowed, we've laughed in pub, and now it's time to give back.
Oh, that's a lovely sentiment.
Yeah.
Hope lots of people buy Ninkasi and you can donate a lot of money.
Yeah, it's not a huge amount, but anything's,
Yes.
awareness more than anything. They need
Yeah.
awareness. So
And a gesture that that you're doing it, and it brings to attention that this charity actually exists.
yeah. So sorry, I interrupted you factoring.
No, that's all right. So yes, early beer. So it developed over the millennia and became a little more sophisticated. But even so, yeast was. People didn't know what was causing the alcohol until about 1850, believe it or not.
Right.
So late. Louis Pasteur, the French scientist and microbiologist who discovered pasteurization is named after him. So he was studying spoilage organisms in wine and beer. And so all these bacteria coming into, just floating around in the air. And because they had microscopes by then, he was able to look at the liquid, and he saw that this little creature called yeast, he realized it was that was giving the alcohol to wine and to beer and cider. And so he's the one that discovered what yeast was. People knew that white stuff was it, but it was actually called God is good in English for hundreds of years, because they thought, again, God, and it's going back to the pagan deities of millennia ago, that it was a supernatural thing that came from a god. I believe that as well. Early beer had no hops in it, so you wouldn't have had a job in those early days, Charlie, at Charles Farram, I'm afraid, but you would have made some lovely hats.
Lovely hats.
So, lovely hats. No hops, so beer would have been flavoured with herbs, spices, twigs, all sorts of things. You can get bitter herbs, by the way, so it wouldn't necessarily have been sweet, because you could get bitter herbs to balance that sweetness out. Hops were not used in beer, really, until about the 800s. In about 1060, a well-known, she's well-known now, Saint Hildegard of Bingen, a German nun. She was also a natural healer, and she studied plants and things like that. And she wrote a book about healing plants, and she'd looked at hops, and she realized that hops stopped food and drink from going off, putrefying. So she wasn't necessarily saying put hops into beer, but what she did was make people aware that was a preservative, because hops, as you know, they're not just there for flavour, aroma and bitterness, they're there because they're a natural preservative. So it was her, St. Hildegard, who introduced hops as a very, very useful thing for brewers to use. So hops started to be used in brewing, and now you don't get beers very often without hops. It's so rare that you get a non-hopped beer. And hops, as we know, are the sexy beasts of brewing. As you are. So and all these lovely varieties of hops that give us gorgeous aromas.
I think that's one thing, if people even know what a hop is in the first place. Obviously hop growing areas, Kent, Herefordshire, Worcestershire, people just know because it's their regional emblem most of the time, but they don't realize that there's like 150 plus hop varieties, and each one has got a different characteristic.
Yeah, I mean, I still do use this analogy, actually. I say that if you think about a rose, so different colors, different perfumes, different shaped petals, they look completely different depending on the variety. Now, as we know, hops always look like that or very similar to that, but the aromas and the flavors and the levels of bitterness vary depending on the variety and where they're grown in the world. Absolutely. Sounds like I'm telling you what your job is and what you do, but I'm doing this on behalf of anybody who might be listening.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's the point, So again, soils, weather, all affects the taste. You can have one variety, the same variety grown in two places in the world, it won't be the same.
That's really interesting, that, because I remember I used to do tours of Fuller's Brewery years ago, And we'd always take our visitors into the hop store and let them have a little smell of the hops. They were mostly pelletized hops. And they were a traditional brewery, Fuller's were, but they had some more modern beers. And one of them had the American hop Willamette in it. And that wasn't grown in England at the time. So they bought it from Farham's, Charles Farham, your esteemed employer. And so it was the American version. So you'd smell it and you get a really strong cat wee smell, and people go, ew, disgusting. And I say, well, you don't get it in the beer, but they call this hop the Sauvignon Blanc of hops because it's got that Sauvignon Blanc cat wee sort of characteristics, plus the grapefruit and the lemon as well. And then it was started to be grown in England, and Fuller's started getting the Charles Farham English grown Willamette. And I noticed the cat wee smell had gone, even though it was the same hop variety, different soils, different climate, irrigated in America, rainfall irrigated in England, and it changed it. Yeah. So no, it's true. The hops, sexy beasts. So let's talk about Elizabeth I, should we?
Yes.
Let's loved the beer. You know, everybody drank beer. It's hard to believe now that there weren't any options for drinking water. And beer is mostly water. And it's a safe source of drinking water because the alcohol kills the pathogens in the water. And if it has hops in it, the hops will kill any pathogens as well. And so tea and coffee didn't exist until the 17th century, not in England. And it was so expensive. Tea and coffee was beyond the price of most people. It was so expensive to buy tea and coffee. And so everybody drank beer. That was your option, or ale. You didn't drink milk. Ooh, no. I mean, that would probably have gone off. There was no refrigeration anyway. You might drink cider, drink wine. So you'd be drinking alcohol, basically, as a source of water or refreshment. Beer is always the best refreshment because it's mostly water. So Elizabeth drank her ale. She loved her ale and drank a couple of pints every morning for breakfast. And, you know, mid-morning and lunch and dinner. And throughout the day, and people go, oh my goodness, you know, she must have been a bit of a drinker. She was just doing what everybody else did, which was drink loads of ale.
If they didn't, like, you know, you kind of get not immune, but like acclimatized to the amount of alcohol that you're drinking, they could probably, do you think they just functioned normally?
Probably did, actually. And also some people would have drunk the small beer, which was the very low alcohol beer, so maybe 2%. But you're right. I mean, I don't know about you, but during lockdown, my tolerance for alcohol has really plummeted. You know, I'm such a cheap date now. So, so until tea and coffee were beyond the reach of a poor person, then poor people and people without any money or unlimited funds would drink beer. That was your choice. In fact, sales of beer plummeted in the mid-19th century because the tax on tea was reduced. And so people on no income or very limited income started drinking tea instead of ale for water, to have something to drink. So a cup of tea, and a bun on the corner. They didn't have any cooking facilities, so everything was, I'll buy something off the tea cellar or whatever.
Yeah.
But it had a big impact on the volumes of beer being drunk. But beer is very nutritious. So as well as giving you water, it gives nutrition as well, and always has done. When you ferment any food, it goes through a process called biological ennoblement, which means that it increases it's a lovely phrase, isn't it? It increases the nutritional value of the food. And all alcohol is food because it's made from a foodstuff. And so it's food. But yes, so it's much more nutritious to drink the beer than to eat the bread bun.
Right. Okay.
And
calories. Let's talk about calories whilst we're on nutrition.
Yes. So a pint of beer, so it depends on the amount of alcohol. So alcohol has calories. In any alcoholic drink, 2/3 of the calorific count comes from the alcohol itself. Okay. The remainder of the calories comes from what it's made from. Now, to get alcohol, you ferment sugars. So with grapes, with wine, it's grape juice, sugars. With cider, it's apple juice, sugars. With beer, it's sugars that come from cereals. And the alcohol the yeast converts the sugars to alcohol. But there are still some residual sugars left because you need those sugars for body. Also, not all sugars are fermentable, so there's still some sugars left over, which have calories. The body burns the alcohol basically and converts it into water and carbon dioxide and a compound, which I can't remember what it's called, but anywho, most of the calories have gone, but the calories from the sugars are still left there. And if the body is burning alcohol, and fat, it's not burning the calories from the sugars, which are carbohydrates. So this is where the calories of alcohol come in, because most of the alcohol calories have been converted and burnt during the alcohol being dealt with by the body. The calorific count of alcoholic drinks is what's left over, the carbs from the sugars. That's where the calories are. And so carbs convert to fat, because if they're not being burnt by the body, they will convert to fat, which is why some people
is there a particular style or beer brand or anything you should look out for that's got less sugars left over?
Yes. Well, if you choose a dry wine, you will have very few carbohydrates or sugars. Now, a dry wine, right, when you ferment alcohol, wine or cider, if you ferment to what's known as dryness, that is not something to do with mouthfeel. That is the sugars have gone, basically. To taste it, it's not sweet at all. So it's really, really dry. So it's known as, it's not sweet. So therefore, it's described as dry. So if you've ever had, say, a Bordeaux wine, or a red Bordeaux, a Cabernet Sauvignon from France, or a Merlot from France, the blend, that's a Bordeaux, there's no sugars in that because they've all been fermented, but the wine is 13% alcohol.
Okay.
You've got some calories from that. Most winemakers and most cider makers will add sugar back to sweeten it because it's more palatable for a wider audience. And that's known as back sweetening. So therefore you're getting sugars and carbohydrates and calories from what's being added back. In winemaking, it's known as dosage or dosage.
Dosage, right.
So either choose a very dry red wine.
I was nearly going to make a joke then. That's why I'm laughing and go, I've got a hat called dosage. I haven't.
Well, that's the next one then. The next that you're going to do is dosage. It's going to have a bottle of wine and glass on a little tray. So yeah, go for very dry ciders that haven't been back sweetened, or you can get you could go for a spirit because there's no carbs in spirits, but there's loads of alcohol.
Yeah. And
you drink in small measures. So it depends if you want a no carbohydrate diet or a low carb diet.
So beer, is there a beer style that?
Yes, you can get beers that have been fiddled with to make them lower carb. But when you remove anything, it's a compromise. There's a trade-off.
Yeah, okay.
Do you want the carbs and the flavour in the body, or do you want no carbs and a very watery, flaccid, I'm going to say flaccid, beer that doesn't have an awful lot of body to it? So it is a trade-off, but you can get them. I would go for beer because not only do you get the nutritional benefit and loads of health benefits as well from the individual ingredients, and lager beers have lower calories because they have fewer sugars. And the reason for that is because lager yeast ferments more of the sugars than an ale yeast does. And now we're getting into yeast again, aren't we?
Yeah, we are, yeah. Maybe we should go and work for yeast companies.
I'm fascinated by yeast.
I am, but it's very scientific.
Oh, isn't it? I mean, it really is. I mean, I describe to people, say brewing is an art and a science. Absolutely. And the brewer really needs to know the science. To make a really good beer, you need to know your science for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm quite happy with hats and cinema and that instead, and the science of hats and making it stand up on your head and stay there.
Oh gosh, I should have got my hop crown and worn it, shouldn't I?
Yeah, and your
It's
hop earrings.
oh God, I wasn't thinking, was I? Oh, blooming heck. Loser. I'll save those
Anyway,
for that time.
so what about low alcohol beer, or is again that I suppose you're wanting to drink a beer too?
I'm a great advocate of low alcohol beers because what I've been doing, I do drink alcohol, as you know, but what I've been doing, I've been interspersing low alcohol beers with alcohol beers when I drink at home. Unfortunately, you can't really get good quality or tasty non-alcoholic beers in most bars and pubs. You can't yet. Hopefully it'll change. But at home, I'd start off with an alcohol beer, maybe have a couple, and then I'd go on to a non-alcohol one. Because by that point, your brain is convinced that you're drinking beer because it looks like beer, it smells and tastes like beer. And then you may go and have another alcoholic drink, another alcoholic beer, or just stick on the non-alcoholic ones. With no alcohol beers, there's several ways that you can trick your drinker into thinking, oh yeah, this is proper beer. One of the big things about beer and lower alcohol beers is that you might end up having a rather watery, light body, which isn't very satisfying. But what you can do, there's a couple of things you can do. You can add oats into the brew ingredients. Oats will really bulk up the body of a beer and still have, let you have a very low alcohol beer. Or you can add a sugar called lactose. It's a milk sugar. And quite a lot of brewers do that, which isn't good for vegans. Strict vegans won't want that because it's a milk product, but that adds to the body as well. I find with non-alcohol beers that the ales work much better that have got loads of hops in them, because hops are so full-flavoured and aromatic if you choose the right variety, that you get your glass of beer, your non-alcohol beer, oh, it smells gorgeous, oh, it smells like beer, and then you taste it, tastes like beer. So your brain is going, it's beer, it's flavoursome, it's aromatic, it's beer. And you get a really satisfying drink, I think.
Yeah.
The ones that don't work for me are the pale lagers, the Pilsner styles, because that's already a delicate type of beer and it's a light-bodied beer, and I don't think it works well in the low alcohol sector. But that's just me.
So you just say, you've got your glass of beer, glassware. That's a big thing, because with your gins and cocktails, all of the types, you've got such nice glassware that's more appealing to, I'm not going to say just women, but somebody that wants that flashy glassware. So I've noticed now glassware is becoming a thing for beer.
Yes, very much so.
Yeah, I mean, like, it doesn't concern me to have a pint in front of me, but if you've got a nice stemmed glassware for the whole experience, seems a bit better. But I don't know why, that's just something in your head, I suppose.
Well, actually, the shape of the glass will affect the drinking experience, and it also affects how the aromatics stay in the glass or if they dissipate, how the head develops in the glass, how it touches different parts of your tongue, depending on the wideness of the neck of the glass. For instance, if you look at wheat beer, so a German wheat beer, for instance, a wheat beer is all about the head. So you need this big pillowy head. So that's part of the design of the beer. It's the attractive look of that particular style of beer. And in German wheat beers, you'll have a narrow glass. It might be an isosceles triangle shape, but it's designed to enhance that lovely head.
Right.
And then if you have an aromatic sort of beer, so an IPA, for instance, with modern hops that are very aromatic, you want a glass, ideally a chalice glass, with a big bowl and a narrowing at the neck. So what that does, it keeps the aromas in the bowl, and you've got a narrow neck, so it funnels them to your nose because you want those lovely aromas. Yeah. Now, if you are drinking if you're in the pub you order a pint of beer, you're going to get the standard glass. It's called a nonic, and it's the bog standard
I've got
generic.
a hat called a nonic. No.
Better do. If you don't, you're in trouble, mate. So that's wide. There's no design to it. It's just a blooming. It's that.
Yeah.
It's actually it's a Belgian craft brewery, but it's basically a sort of nonic, and it's more water glass. That's going to do nothing for your beer, but what it does do, it's so wide, so you've got a big mouthful of beer, you just glug your beer and it hits the back of your throat before you've even tasted it. Because tasting beer, you need to have it in your mouth for a few seconds, because tasting beer is actually smelling beer. Because our brain registers flavour through the nose. 80% of the taste of anything is actually flavour.
Hence why when you've got a cold, you can't taste anything. Yeah.
Exactly. And you can smell things from within your mouth, actually, because the aromas go up through your mouth to your nasal cavity and hit your smell cells. So those glug, 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 I'm drinking, I'm on a session, glug, glug, glug. You're not actually tasting it. You're just throwing it into your throat and then swallowing it. And the brewer has gone to a lot of trouble to make that taste really good. So I think it's really disrespectful to drink like that. Yeah. And I always sip anyway. I like to sip my beer. But yeah, glassware, very important.
I do sip. It's not anything that I consciously do, but my pinky comes up with a pint glass. It just does. It doesn't matter. It's pint glass, pinky, and then sipping.
Oh yeah, mine does as well, actually.
Yeah, you can't.
I think it's balanced because it's such a big.
It might be a balance. That's a good point. It might be balanced. Yeah.
God, we could talk about beer forever, but beer is the everlasting story. I often say to people that beer is the thing that brings people together from all over the world, whether you speak the language or not, it unites you. And it's a never-ending conversation. We have a mutual friend, Emma Inge, and we talk about beer all the time.
Yeah.
And I have friends who don't drink beer, and they go, "What do you talk about?" I go, "Beer." What is there to say about beer?
Well,
obviously, not beer. Yeah. And it's always interesting, always.
When I first started, I'd try this, and it'd be pale and light, and I'm like, I can't do this. I don't like it. Not realise, because I think people think when you first start on beer, they should just give you the lightest thing, the easiest thing.
Oh gosh, yeah.
Then I went to this beer competition that I was helping to actually run, and what was it? Potbelly's Beijing Black Licorice Porter. Pretty sure it was a porter.
Yeah.
Dark beers. Then that became my thing. So many different flavours, as thick as you can get.
Oh, yeah.
Chocolate, triple chocolate.
Oh, I'm with you.
Keep going with that.
Oh, and then you working at Titanic, they do plum porter. Did they do that when you worked there?
Not when I worked there. Not when I worked there. It was just still your standard stuff. No, there was none of this raspberry that he's doing now and chocolate cappuccinos.
Stop. So he's doing all the porters with those.
Cappuccino stout. That's a stout.
What, at Titanic?
Yeah.
Yeah, I must try them.
Something like chocolate and vanilla, or something in vanilla, which I've never tried because it's always run out by the time I get to it at a festival or something.
Oh, yeah. Popular then.
So no, there was none of that then. I mean, he's making gins now as well. So
really,
yeah, and pub in a box. So you get your glass, your little actual plum to put in your plum gin, and that is brilliant. Little quiz to go with it.
Brilliant idea.
Yeah, brilliant. So they've been great over lockdown, and a few brewers are doing that. Then these big flavors, these great fruity flavors coming in with the different hops and stuff. I'm not a fan of like your strawberries and flavors and stuff like that, and your soft fruit flavors. And then sours came in. Oh, I was like, this is the worst thing I've ever tasted in my life. If you carry on drinking a few of them, then they become quite nice, and they are quite refreshing in the right place, the right time.
Yeah.
Yes. They'll cut through your stodgy food or your...
Absolutely, and anything oily. And then what about smoked beers? I love a smoked beer. How are you on smoky beers?
I'm not a fan, but I know people that love them. But anything smoked, I'm not that keen on.
I think it's a flavour that people need to like to begin with.
Yeah.
But it's a shocker. If you give somebody a smoked beer and they're not expecting it, They think, have you given me frazzles in a glass? Because some smoked beers do smell like frazzles, don't they? Or
Yeah, I
bacon.
don't know whether that's kind of an association, maybe, that I'm not expecting my barbecue in my glass.
Well, historically, all beers would have been smoky because the way that you malt barley, you need to. This isn't for you, Charlie, by the way. This is for anybody who's watching. Barley is malted to make it into a product that the brewer can use. And to do that, part of that process is using heat. Before you had an indirect source of heat, coke, for instance, or nowadays we have electricity, but wood was the way that you malted. So all the malt would have been smoked.
Yeah.
So all beers would have been smoky, just as our ancestors until Louis Pasteur, and cultured yeast, beers would have been sour because wild yeast makes sour beers. So, what we think of now, like, sour, oh no, ooh. Our ancestors, that was the norm for them.
How it's so strange how things just like turn around.
Yeah.
Things that were an okay taste suddenly become a bad, that means it's off taste. But yeah. There's so many different flavours. You can't say you don't like one. I love it when people say I don't like beer. Doors closed, gauntlet thrown. Here we go.
I know. My one for doing that, and I'd blind taste them on it, and I'll say, well, what do you drink? Do you drink red wine? Do you like cider? Yes, I like those. Hit them up with the Duchesse de Bourgogne, which is a Belgian beer. The style is red Flanders ale or Flanders red ale. And it's sour, but it's sour in a way that's a little bit like balsamic vinegar, which sounds disgusting for a beer, but it's got a really vinous, winey sort of sherry note to it, but a sourness.
Okay, I know what you mean.
And an oakiness because it's been aged in oak barrels, huge oak barrels for 18 months. It's incredible beer, but it doesn't taste or look like beer because it's a sour beer. You don't get a head on it. No sour beers have a head because they don't have hops in them. They've got a tiny little amount of hop in them for preservative, but hops and sourness don't go well together.
Okay.
And it's a compound in the hops that combines with proteins in the cereal that create an air bubbles that create the head. So if you don't have the hops there to do that, you don't get a head. So the sour beers don't have a head. So you can give it to somebody, go, oh, just try that. And they'll go, oh gosh, what is it? Is it a red wine of some sort? Oh, is it a cider? And you go, no, it's actually a beer. Don't believe you, because to them, beer is bitter and it's brown and bitter, comes in a right big pint.
Yeah.
I do that accent when I
I
say that.
Yeah, you just go northern, yeah.
And I am northern as well. So
yeah,
sour beers. Oh yeah, that's a way to convert some beer drinkers. In my book, The Philosophy of Beer, there's a whole chapter, well, it's a really short chapter, about the Belgian beer culture, because Belgian beer culture is so wonderful and it's been recognised by UNESCO as a intangible gift to humanity. There's this register of really special things in the world, and Belgian beer culture is on that list. That's how special it is.
That's interesting. So what I would say to people, don't be nervous about going to a bar and ordering a beer. It is for you. It's not just like someone else that you don't understand. Try it. There'll be bottles in the fridge behind, all these different fonts. Some have got fonts on the walls behind, you'll notice. Just ask for a taste or just try it. I think if you don't know about it, you do think that's for someone, it's them. I don't know, so I'll just stick to my thing. But yeah, just try it.
Or they should invite us to go out with them. We'll advise them what to do.
We can do that.
They've got to buy the drinks though. We'll be the teachers. They can buy the drinks, and we can convert.
It's research, isn't it? So
absolute research, and also it's missionary as well. It's our missionary work on spreading the word. The good word. That is the good book. So we'd spread the word.
Yeah, can get it signed.
Signed copies from the School of Booze.
I've got a really long message.
Look at that. In my best fountain pen.
That means I can't eBay it after. Can't eBay it after now though, so.
Well, you could somebody called Charlie could buy it, couldn't they? No, it'll add to the price. It'll add at least a penny value to the price of that book. So you should be able to flog it for about 59 pence now. So yeah.
Well, it's not really worth the trip to the post office, is it? So yeah, we'll wrap it up there then. I think that's a good time. So there's loads of info there. Loads of.
So Beer Day Britain, June the 15th, 7 p.m. is the National Cheers to Beer. Raise a glass, say cheers to beer, and then do a social media message with the hashtag cheers to beer. And you can do it anywhere you want to, pub, home, park, bench, bus shelter, wherever you are, drinking beer with your mates. And it can be any beer at all. It doesn't even have to be a British beer, any beer at all. Just join in.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good, yeah.
For the love of beer.
The love of beer. Oh, brilliant. And thank you ever so much.
My pleasure. Thank you for inviting me on, and bye-bye, everybody. If you're still with us, bye-bye.
Goodbye. Bye, everybody. Yes, thanks for watching.